Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thanks for joining me again. Today is going to be the third part of a series talking about income in general. In this case, I'm going to be talking about investment income. It's going to cover quite a bit of territory, and so I'm not going to be able to go into all the detail I might like to. You don't have the time, and I don't have the time, but we can look at some aspects of this in more detail at a later date if that seems to be of real interest to a number of people. In any event, I do want to launch right into it by one warning. There are a number of people, not a majority, but there are a number, who come down and their feeling is they want to buy a home that's going to earn them a lot of money when they sell it. They're looking at the home they're going to live in as an investment for money. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but I tell them, you're here to find a place to invest your life when you're talking about your home. This has to be a place that you like, that you feel comfortable in, that you enjoy being there and dealing with that neighborhood and that surroundings. You don't want to choose a place for your own home where you think somebody in 3 years or 5 years or whatever is going to want to live. You choose a place where you are comfortable. And that's, I think, a critical point, because you're the one who has to adjust and become involved with the nation and get to know it. You might as well do it from a home that is your home, as opposed to a home that may be for somebody else in the future. So keep that in mind. Now, one problem that many people have when they come down, particularly the older generations, my own age group, I'm 71 for the record, they'll come down with images of developing countries and so forth, Panama and so on, from 30, 40 years ago, or even from more recently if they've been reading the wrong things in the wrong publications or whatever, because very little is printed on published on the small nations that really goes into sufficient detail to give you a real understanding, because they're small. And you're talking about Brazil, you can find piles of information on Brazil if you're really interested, in all sorts of publications everywhere, many of them looking at the different regions and so forth and what have you. But in Panama, not so much. So they don't have a real grip on what's happening in the country. And they come down, however, with already having made their minds up as to what they want to do when they get here. What kind of business, what kind of investment that they want to make. And I always tell them, that's okay, that's good, that you have an idea, but don't get married to it. Get down here and come to know the country first before you make any sort of final decision, because it is not something familiar to you. Until you get used to it, until you understand what is already down here and where the needs may be in the future, you're just guessing. And that's not a good basis for an investment. Although it's okay because it gives you a direction when you first arrive. But be prepared to change direction if that's necessary. It's also very important to recognize that with the internet as it is, and with everything that's gone on in this planet in the last decade, and certainly in Panama, all the Panamanians who've been educated overseas and have returned, we have quite a large number coming back to take part in the growth here. All the expatriates have been pouring in here for the last decade and a half. There's not a lot that you have in North America and Europe that you can't find in Panama, particularly in Panama City. And if you can't find it right now, it's probably on its way and opening up in 3 or 4 months. So you need to keep that one in mind, that what you may think of would be new and exciting here in Panama isn't new and exciting, because we're already well aware of it. An example of that is a young man, lots of enthusiasm, came down. This is about 10 years ago, when we lacked a lot of things still in Panama City. And he was just excited about medical office complexes. Okay, these are buildings full of medical offices that are across the street or next door to a hospital, and so doctors have ready access to the hospital facilities. And I'm sitting there, this is a decade ago, and I haven't visited all the hospitals, I had no reason to, but the two I knew both had these complexes, very ordinary. I didn't want to tell him, no, that's a terrible idea, because I didn't know about the other hospitals. So I said, the first thing you have to do is go to each hospital and ask them, do you have a medical office building? And because you have to find one that doesn't have one for this to work, and I know there are at least a couple here who do. Well, in truth, all of them do, as far as I know. I think every one of them has that I've been in. I've been in more than 2 now. And they had them back then. So he was looking to introduce something that was already here on the assumption that it was something, an advanced idea that only up in the U.S. or Europe would they have had this. No, not true. And even less so today than it was 10 years ago. We've had people who write and say, how about mini storage units? I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, these little storage units that individuals or families can buy and stick things in, and sometimes they're climate controlled and humidity controlled and so forth and what have you. We have them. We have quite a few of them. Whether we have enough or not, I don't know. Whether there's room for more and so on, I have no idea. That's market research. But it's not as if people aren't aware of this. They are very much aware of it. So when you're coming in with a business idea, be prepared to change it, or be prepared to just drop it and look at another one that you will recognize because in its absence here. You're not looking for what exists, you're actually for what doesn't exist. And that's a little trickier, but you just have to keep talking to people and asking them. And the simple question is, what is there that's missing here that you would really want to have? Just ask that question 500 times, wherever you go. Because although we may have it in Panama City, they may not have it in one of the provincial cities. And that might be an area where your idea could work. But at the same time, you've got to be aware of whether that market there really does want that facility or that business. Where it stands now, you have to go and look for yourself and talk to people and ask questions all the time. When you do, you'll get a sense. Now, excuse me, these are informal videos, so I'm going to cough from time to time. God forbid I have to sneeze, I'm loud. But anyhow, moving right along. It takes time to learn. So come down here and be prepared to learn. Be prepared to spend, if you're really serious about starting a business, is really focusing on that and putting your time in. You're not going to do this in 2 weeks. People come down and try to do that in 2 weeks. No. You're going to make your decision to move down here, or relocate here, and come down to live probably before you've made your final decision. If you've got plenty of money, you can afford to go back and forth to your home nation, okay. Then you can do it part-time over a period of time, although it's not as useful as doing it while you're living here. Or you may do it as a tourist here in this, for 3, 4, 5 months on a tourist visa without bothering to do the residency visa until you have things straightened out. But the key point is to give yourself time, but to work very hard on it. If you don't have necessary expertise, hire it. You can find someone, perhaps a young person or a taxi cab driver that you like, I don't know, but somebody who speaks reasonable English, for example, if that's your language, and have them come along with you. Have them by the hour, inexpensive, to come along and interpret for you if Spanish is a problem, which it usually is for most people who come down. Instead of trying to find the one person who's going to be willing to speak in English to you, because many will be embarrassed to try to do that. In order to get the full story, you're going to need to hear and understand the Spanish version, and if you can't do that, then take somebody along who can. And it doesn't have to be somebody in business. It doesn't have to be somebody with a college education. It just has to be somebody who's reasonably intelligent and speaks enough of your language to be understandable, and who seems to be, in your mind, a friendly, helpful type of person. That can help. But you're really going to have to work very, very hard. And you're not going to probably make that decision as to what you're going to do for some weeks and perhaps some months. It will happen when it happens. So don't set a deadline. You work with what you have. It will come to you when it's ready to. And when you have gone out to find it, then it comes to you, you might say. If you're not out there looking for it, it may not knock on your door. So you've got to go out and you knock on its door. Follow me. So that is a critical idea. And when it comes to small businesses in particular, if you want to run one, it's critical. Because a lot of money goes into that. But above all, a lot of work. So we have any number of people who've come down and wanted to set up a bed and breakfast. That's very common. Some have done that and very successfully, and a lot of them have done it and not successfully. Others have done it successfully and discovered how much work it is and given it up because it just was too overwhelming in terms of work for the income earned. All right. So try to think in terms of what it is you want to do yourself, because you're going to have to be involved. You just hire somebody else and then walk away. You're going to have to be deeply involved with it as well. So you want to take the time to learn about the area. You want to check out different areas. You want to talk to a lot of people and say, what is it you're missing? What do you want? What do you wish you had here? And so forth. And not just people from your own country. The Lord knows we have American and Canadian retirees down here who only talk to American and Canadian retirees. This is a teeny weeny, itsy bitsy sliver of the total market in Panama. And they're fine people, of course. I know many of them, but they're very small. The big market is way beyond that, and most of it actually is Spanish-speaking. It comes from countries all over Latin America. Many of them are here on business. This is a business center for the region. It's grown hugely in the last decade. I mean, literally thousands of jobs have been created here. Over 100, far over 100. Multinational corporations have set up regional offices here and so forth. So we've got a lot of these people, and they are typically bilingual, trilingual, Portuguese sometimes, and they earn good incomes and so on, and they're very much an active and important market here. Then, of course, we have Panamanians themselves who have benefited from the increase in economic activity over the last decade. So you've got a lot of folks who might be very much interested in what you're planning to do, but if you don't talk to them, if you don't reach out and get to know something about them, you're not going to know. So if you end up setting up a business which is logically only going to be of interest to people like yourself, well, you may find it hard. One of the things I do when I go into a small business operated by an expatriate, that I know is operated by an expatriate, is look around at the clientele. And there was well, I won't go into detail. I'll just say I have walked into businesses like that, and everybody else in the shop pretty much is an expatriate. And other businesses I walk in, and there's a mixture of different people. Obviously, some of them Spanish-speaking, some of them Panamanian, and so forth. They guess which business is most likely to succeed. And I'm thinking of one in particular. It was just a lovely little restaurant. I really, really liked it, and it was really directed toward North Americans in Panama City, and couldn't make it. It put up a noble effort. The food was good. It was a congenial place to go. But you can't build it on that little tiny sliver. Not a going restaurant in Panama City. You've got to be able to broaden out to others. So you have a lot to learn. You can learn it. People do learn it, and they do set up successful businesses here. And again, at the channel, we have videos from people who have done just exactly that, and you can hear what they have to say on that topic. Now, one area that's particularly of interest to a lot of folks, because it's an area they feel that they're most comfortable with, is real estate. And they know that Panama has had a very hot market in past years, one that survived the big 2009 crash in the U.S. quite handily, in Panama City area particularly, but pretty much countrywide. It got through that very, very well. We did not have a big popping bubble here, thank God. But it's for a variety of reasons I'm not going to go into now, but there were perfectly good reasons. And real estate is not growing as rapidly as it was 7, 8 years ago. That's true, but it continues to be a very significant sector here, and it's likely to go right on being one for some years to come. So yes, real estate's a possibility. But I'm reminded of a young lady who came down. This is quite a few years ago, and she was a friend of a friend, and we were talking. Her father, it turns out, was very wealthy, and I said, well, is he interested in investing down here in Panama too? And she said, yes, definitely, in real estate. And I said, really? I said, where does he want to invest? And she said, he wants to buy what everyone else is buying. Those were her exact words. And I thought, oh my God, talk about making a big mistake. Oh, he wants to pay the highest price. I was reminded of this story just a day or so ago when I was listening to an interview with Jim Grant, who some of you may have heard of, probably most if you haven't. He's very well known in finance circles and so on, and investment circles. A very nice, good man. He was just talking in general, and in terms of investing, he's anywhere, but in this case, we're actually talking about investing in other markets. He said, never stand in line to invest your money. I said, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about right now. If you're going to buy where everybody else is buying, if you have to stand in line to invest in someplace, then that property is already reflected, and its value is reflected the increase in interest. The fact that there's a long line out there, I assure you, yeah, you're going to be paying top dollar for that. What you're looking for, if your goal is to be a substantial return on investment. Now, if your goal is to maintain a certain stability, or at least hoping that this will at least hold its value, then maybe you want to get a line. Again, that's not an easy decision to make, and which line to get into, but you do want to probably be in something that's already recognized as a good place to live. But if you're talking, as I am today, about earning income, about making substantial profit from either the rental of it or the use of it as a business or simply the resale at a later date, then you don't want to stand in line. You want to find someplace where there's a good reason to believe this is going to open up. And those places are hard to find because there are no lines. And finding them is not easy. And you don't find it in 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever. I've been working on this for a long time, and I've watched with great frustration as people poured in to buy in areas that are already well established, and where the return on investment is going to be very small, if any. Just simply by the virtue of the fact that they're surrounded by competition, and prices have already risen substantially as a result of that. So when I talk to them, I want to encourage them to look to somewhere else where there is no line. They immediately say no. Now that's true of Panamanians as well, particularly the older generation, my age group, who are not the kind to take risks. They will typically also buy and sell only in areas that are currently popular or traditionally have been popular. The result is that most of their activity has been in the Panama City area, where the money is, and where traditionally people have made the big investments. The areas of the country that have been opened up and have become popular to some extent, that are substantially outside of Panama City, they've all been opened by expats. So you're going to have, if you're going to be an expatriate, you're going to be looking at this, you don't necessarily follow the advice of somebody in Panamanian real estate because they tend to be very conservative here. If they sell it, of course, they only want you to look in areas where they're selling. And they're not selling in these other areas, so no interest to them. But let's look at 3 examples of them. There's a place you may have read about called Bocas del Toro. It is as far away from Panama City as you can get and still be in Panama. And actually, the area of interest is not the whole province of Bocas del Toro, but the islands just off the coast in the Caribbean. This area came into view and it became an interesting property to foreigners because of basically middle-income expats who, with yachts or with sailboats or one thing or another, boated on down, fell in love with that area, found that the land was really, really cheap because our Caribbean coast is not open to development yet to any significant extent, so it was cheap, and they set up a little community. In 2004, when I first arrived, and I asked people in real estate about Bocas, it was just really being talked about. They all across the board, every one of them in Panama real estate said, forget it, not going to work. It's ridiculous. It's way out there. Nobody cares. They don't have any amenities. There's no services. This is going nowhere. This whole thing's going to fall apart. Well, I tell you, I had friends and associates and people I knew who lived out in Bocas del Toro at that time. And I can't tell you how much I admire those folks, because they didn't care what anybody had to say. They loved that area, and they were going to make it work. And they worked hard to do that. They were ignored by local government. They sometimes found the local government was their worst enemy. They had there were scams going on and con artists galore, expats as well as Panamanians. It was just crazy up there initially, and they just didn't get the support they absolutely deserved from the capital city. But they demanded it and kept demanding it and stuck it out. Today, Bocas del Toro is alive and kicking, and it's a good tourist center. It's still way out there, so to speak. Typically, you have to fly to get up there to enjoy it. But it survived, and it has grown. And I just have so much admiration for that hearty crew of expats who didn't listen to the common accepted wisdom, but saw what they saw and said, we're going to make this work and make it work. It was a painful experience for some of them, but my golly, they did it. God bless them. Now, that's one. There's a different approach. It was in the area of Boquete, which some of you probably pronounce as Boquete. You've seen it on the web. And Volcan. This is in far west of Panama, as is Bocas del Toro. In the mountains, where the climate is more temperate, and is of very great interest to a lot of, particularly retirees coming down. This particular area also was not one that was pushed substantially by Panamanian real estate people. This was really one man, Sam Taliaferro, an American married to a Panamanian who had done development work for expats in Costa Rica. And traveling down here to Panama, he saw this area and he said, my God, this is beautiful. This is equal to anything in Costa Rica, and it's so cheap. I could really do a lot better down here than back in Costa Rica. And this is a decade or so ago, and Sam went to work. He had his own money, and so he put a good deal of it in building a very exclusive, at the time, extremely exclusive housing development there, and then promoting it, and promoting the whole area. In fact, Boquete and Volcan, that whole area has a lot to thank to Sam. He's passed away. He was considered by some people to be abrasive and aggressive and so forth. You had to be. I mean, more power to you, Sam, wherever you are. That's pretty much what you had to be in order to get in there and get something done. And those people who have enjoyed living there since then owe you a lot. So that's a way to do it, but that requires quite a substantial sum of money, and as well as somebody who's determined, just like the Bocas people, to make it work. If you don't have that, it could be a long time before that area could hope to make it. A third area, more recently, again, is the Azeuro. The Azeuro is that hump that sticks out into the Pacific. You see it on the maps. It sort of sticks out there. It's not the name of a province, but the side closest to Panama City, which is the western side of the Azeuro, has really grown in the last few years, fairly substantially. It too was opened up by expats. And I was fortunate enough, again, maybe a decade ago, to meet a group of young men in their 20s who were all well-to-do. They had money, but they were surfers. And they had discovered that surfing was great out there in this particular part of the world. And they'd come down to invest, and they'd open up their own housing development out there. Very enthusiastic, a very enjoyable group to talk to. And they'd seen one of my websites, so they'd asked to chat with me about it. They're still here, and they're a little older now, of course, and they're still out there, and their development survived. They survived the 2009 crash up north, which may have affected them too, I don't know. But that area, again, is finally now catching on, but it's catching on once again because expats went in and made that happen, not just this small group. Actually, this is a mixture of people like this group of young men and a Frenchman who came before them, a wonderful guy who's got an absolutely magnificent but very expensive development out there, and then a bunch of other people of differing backgrounds. It's been quite an effort. It wasn't a team effort. They all worked individually, but it all came together, and each ended up supporting the other, and now that area has become an area of interest to people too. So if you're looking for the kind of real estate that isn't going to offer 5% a year gains or something, but you're looking to something that's going to offer a major increase, well, it's the risk-reward ratio that comes into play here. If you want the high reward, then you've got to take a higher risk. You've got to go somewhere that isn't selling particularly well at the moment, or people don't even think about it at the moment. Find out why, and that you do by asking questions. Check it out, and think about it. I did this very same thing with one part of Panama, and I found that every excuse for not being there, for not having any developments there, might have been valid 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but was no longer valid. But people were stuck with this image, so they were ignoring it, despite the fact it's beautiful. And it's slowly gathering some impetus down there. But it's still very new. We don't expect miracles, but at the same time, we may be at a breaking point here, and I hope so. I'm helping a middle-class Panamanian family now sell their land, but it's a huge piece of land. I'm not going to give you a pitch for that. I mean, you got $3 million or something, let me know. It's very inexpensively priced, but it's a very large piece, and it's just happens to be spectacular for a lot of good reasons. But I'm having to help them market it to people outside Panama, because Panamanians think, no, that area, nobody really is there yet. They're going to wait. They're going to wait until there's a line. Then they'll get in line too. But it's a very, in my mind, the best and most logical place to be first in line. And particularly if you've got the money to take a piece of land like that and do a little something with it, yes. Yeah. So it's a challenge, but that's what I have to do. I have to help this family reach out to expats, because we've reached out to the local Panamanian community. No, not yet. So, okay, expats will take the risk, but expats will get the rewards as well. It's a disappointment to me, because I'd much rather be working, as I am with this family, with Panamanians. But it's the way that it is. So you are in a position, if you're serious about it, and you've got some money to look at, a small lot perhaps, and not what I'm talking about necessarily, but something small, to take your time and look around. And it's too much to discuss right now. Maybe I'll do another one on analyzing and how you go about determining what's a good and a potentially interesting area. But the key thing is that you don't get in line. You go wherever the lines are. You get to know what's there. But then you go where the lines aren't, and you begin to look much more carefully at areas that aren't interesting to other people but have very strong positives. Not an easy task. But if that's what you want, a major return on investment, that's pretty much what you got to do. You just cannot stand in line. All right. So this is basically what I wanted to cover today. I'm going to say first to remember in buying your own home to focus on yourself. When you're in business, to understand that this is not a backward third world country. You need to come down here and get to know what it is. There are gaps here. There are definitely gaps that can be filled by somebody from outside, but you have to go out and find them. They may not be in Panama City. They may be out in the countryside, or they may not. You have to be here, and you really have to work at it. If you don't do that, I'd say you have maybe a 20% chance of success. You do that, and you greatly increase, I can give you a percentage, but you'll greatly increase your likelihood of success. So keep that in mind. And then what I like here is don't stand in line to buy what everybody else is buying. In this case, we're talking about real estate, but it could be other things as well. Buy what people are not yet buying, but when you have a good argument for why they will be buying in the future. So that pretty much sums that up. I'm just going to add on here that one of the things that interests me are frontier markets. And frontier markets are markets outside of the major emerging markets, as they call them, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, Indonesia, Mexico, and so forth. These larger economies with 100, 200 million people living there. I'm not talking about them. The frontier markets are those that are smaller, like Panama's. And I've been working hard to develop an index, basically, or means by which to separate out those that are likely to be successful in the future from those that have less of an opportunity to be successful? How do you decide which of these frontier markets? Because almost everything I read, and I read a lot on frontier markets, whatever I can find, is done very poorly, and is basically meant to get you to subscribe or to buy this service or another. Really poorly done. So how do you go about doing that? I've been working hard on that and have finished doing it. So now it's a question of finding a place to publish it if I see fit to do that, or if somebody's interested, or just putting it up myself or whatever. But I will talk about that again at some point in time, because it's not just of interest to people coming to Panama necessarily, but to that group who are really truly interested in investing. And by the way, Panama made the list, but only because it met the criteria. I have very strict criteria here. It met that, so it's on the list, but 14 others on that list too. So there are ways to make things work for you, but they take time, they take effort, they take analysis, and that means setting aside emotion, at least for a while, until you have your analysis straightened out and you have a good reason to do what you do. Then you bring the emotion in to give you the oomph, to get you out of bed, out the door, and get to work. So that's what I try to help people do as best I can. So this has gone on longer than I expected. Sorry, I'll be back with more. Thank you so much for putting up with me, and I look forward to talking to you again.